People know what they need to do health-wise. They know they need to get more sleep, eat more vegetables, but they may not have the self-compassion to do it. And we treat ourselves the way we think we deserve to be treated. The way we treat ourselves is the way the external world treats us.
83% of Americans identify as not very happy, which can hold you back and negatively affect your relationships and your business. On this podcast, we discuss the proven steps to happiness so you can restore balance and rekindle your joy.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of How to Be Happy podcast. Today, my guest is going to be amazing. Her name is Mai, and we're going to talk about a simple research-based practice to increase your happiness. Everyone wants to be happy, right? Mai, welcome to the How to Be Happy podcast. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to be here, Brad. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. I'm so excited for this. So let's just go right to the meat. What is the one concrete activity that you can do to increase your happiness daily?
This is very simple, but you can increase your sleep. Get enough sleep. 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. Be consistent with that because studies show it balances your hormones. It helps balance your insulin levels. Less than 6 hours of sleep can increase suicide, depression, stroke, and cancer. And interestingly enough, getting too much sleep can do the same. So that's more than 9 hours of sleep. So the sweet spot, 7 to 8 hours of sleep, really manage that. And that's just the foundation. That is the possibility of increasing happiness. Without it, you make yourself extremely unhappy. But there are other quadrants in this happiness paradigm that's research-based. Number one, food. The food that fuels your body can really boost your mood, or it can make you lethargic, exhausted, and bring on diabetes. The second thing is that with your mood is to set the intention that you want to be happy. Figure out a vision, write it down. The third thing is movement. Movement can affect your mood. You don't want to wait around until you're in the mood to move. You want to move, and it affects your mood. And the fourth thing is to socially connect with healthy, happy people. In the foundation of that, there's sleep. That's the biggest foundation. Without sleep, you don't have a lot of possibilities. The second thing is to absolutely de-stress. And the third thing is to practice calm breathing. So that's why I'd say focus on sleep first.
Okay. Whoa. You just said a lot. And honestly, that answer, we didn't prepare for this, right? That was not what I expected to hear about happiness, but it is so true, right? Because my focus on happiness is getting rid of the untruths in your life. I can do all the work on a client, but if they're not sleeping, there's no chance they're going to be happy, right? I have a good friend who's a nutritionist, and she just took on a client yesterday who literally is in a schizophrenic state because the guy sleeps like a half an hour a night and all he eats all day is sugar. So sleep to me is really, really key because I bought this ring, this Aura ring about 6 months ago, and man, my life has changed. I thought I was a great sleeper. When I used to smoke weed every night, I'd sleep like 8 to 10 hours a night, and I'd be like, oh, it helps me sleep. What I didn't learn is that number one, I was really only getting post-weed in the last couple of months. I've only been getting, like, when I started this journey, 12 to 20 minutes of deep sleep. Now I'm getting closer to an hour because I've gone through the sleep process and I've realized I have sleep apnea, but I did a lot of research and a lot of studying. And one of the things about sleep is deep sleep is very important, but REM is also important. And what I didn't know is that alcohol and marijuana keep you from getting to REM sleep. And all of those things you mentioned about memory and dementia and all those bad things, like REM and deep sleep are a natural process of your body, right? If you don't get those things, you are going to be an absolute mess no matter what you do. So it's a really interesting answer.
Yes. And then if you want to do daily habits, I highly recommend this free podcast. It's called The Happiness Lab. It's by Laurie Santos.
Okay.
And she's a professor at Yale. And she does evidence-based research on things you can do to make yourself happy, like practice gratitude, random acts of kindness, just really making sure that you have a generous heart. That's really important. And really having that intention. It's very hard to be happy if you don't give yourself permission to be happy. A lot of people don't give themselves permission to be happy.
For sure. So have you watched the Netflix documentary with the famous psychiatrist and the actor Stutz. Have you watched that?
I haven't watched it yet.
Okay, you've got to watch it. The guy's name is Phil Stutz. He's a doctor. He's a psychologist to many of the stars. And I'm blanking on the guy's name, but I'm sure people know it. And he goes through what he calls the life force. And he has 3 levels of the pyramid. And you mentioned that you have a pyramid. At the bottom of it is the personal, which is health, which is sleep, diet, and exercise. That's the critical piece. The middle piece is connection, which you mentioned. You've got to be connected to people to be happy. And the top was basically your relationship with yourself. If you don't have a good relationship with yourself, all bets are off. It's so interesting that you bring up these points because that's exactly what he said in this documentary on how to be happy.
Yeah, it's interesting because self-awareness is the first step to shift. This is really important. I was just at a weekend workshop, Acropalo, listening to Bessel van der Kolk, and he's a pioneer in trauma work. And he said evidence shows that nothing happens unless you really have a solid nervous system to learn. So if you're in fight or flight, your brain locks so you can't learn or be curious. But if you're in your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest, versus your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight, you're able to make good decisions, you're able to learn, and you're able to get curious. And that curiosity brings you to self-awareness. And self-awareness can take you down a very positive path of self-compassion. I've been teaching for over 15 years, and my background is chronic disease prevention. That's what I studied in graduate school. And what the research is showing is that chronic stress leads to chronic disease. And the opposite of disease is ease. And ease opens us up to happiness.
So that is one of the many things I've learned in my 2-year journey on this magical life transformation that I've gone through. I had no idea. I knew stress wasn't good for your body, but I'm in the middle of reading a book. I don't know if you've read it. It's called The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. He's a doctor. He's one of my mentors. He's been a doctor for 40 years and he specializes in trauma and addiction. It's a 600-page book. It's fascinating. And the entire book is how everything, all disease and all mental illnesses, all goes back to stress. Everything. And people have a real problem with this when I post this online, like the cancer and the MS. When I post, a lot of people are like, yeah, this is great. And then other people are like, I can't believe you would say that my stress and my unresolved childhood trauma leads to cancer and MS. But it does. A lot of experts believe it. Go to the MD Anderson Cancer site at the University of Texas in Austin, which they're one of the leading cancer institutes, I think, in the world. And right on their site, it says, stress will fuel cancer. It's undetermined if it causes it. I know in the coming years that science is going to find we all have cancer cells. That's for sure. Why is it that some people get cancer and some people don't? Because it's the level of stress. Where does most stress in the humans come from? It's not your job. It's not your kids. It's from your past. And what you said about fight or flight, Mai, is so true. The fight or flight is caused because trauma takes you out of your present. So you're caught as that little 6-year-old girl for most of your life, right? What can you do in fight or flight? When a lion is chasing you, are you going to be a good business owner? Are you going to be a good mom? Are you going to be a good lover? Are you going to be attentive to your partner's needs if you've got a lion chasing you? No way. So it's fascinating that you have this background. I want to hear more about that. Tell the people listening now that were like me 3 years ago that was like cancer. That's impossible. Stress can't cause that type of stuff. So tell us more about how stress just can literally kill you.
Stress, this is evidence-based research. So some of my clients, which are huge health insurance companies, they give me their research and I have to teach it in layman's terms to employees. And their research is showing that chronic stress can lead to type 2 diabetes because when you're stressed, your insulin levels go up because your body thinks it's running from a lion. So it puts more sugar in your body because it thinks it's going to run. But if it doesn't go back to balance and homeostasis, your blood sugar levels are at a unnatural high. Your insulin levels are higher than it should be. And that can lead to type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is a precursor to other diseases. Not only that, but chronic stress causes chronic inflammation. It can lead to heart disease. And we all have cancer cells in our bodies, but our bodies and our immune system is able to flush it out. When you're chronically stressed, your body can't flush the cancer cells out. So chronic stress inflames your body so it can't fight disease. And it's about your nervous system. So now when I teach, I always talk about the nervous system and how can you bring yourself into the parasympathetic nervous system where all your power is. Unless, of course, a lion's chasing you. Then you need that extra adrenaline. But if it doesn't go back to homeostasis, you create inflammation in your body. And again, it's very simple. The opposite of disease is ease. How can you add joyful health to your day every day? Something that is both joyful and healthy. Like some people say, oh, drinking 2 shots of tequila, that is so joyful for me. And I say, is it healthy? Right? So you got to combine the joy and the health because it's good for your nervous system. It's good for your immune system. And this is evidence-based. I am not just saying this anecdotally. The NIH and scientists like Bessel van der Kolk, he studies this. And you can have a terrible childhood. I myself did not have a joyful childhood. I came from a broken home and it was not pleasant. You can't let that story define you, but you have to feel those feelings in your body. You don't want to get stuck on the story. And you can do that through EMDR and somatic therapy and getting a good counselor that knows about trauma and the body. That's what I'd highly recommend. Get your help. Don't get stuck in the story.
Yeah. The interesting part, though, is so many people are unaware of this, right? So many people are caught up in bad marriages. They don't sleep. Their business isn't good. Their weight is out of control. And they're like, this is just me. This is my life. And we're here to tell you, no, it's not. And where I begin is you mentioned EMDR and all these other techniques, and I use hypnosis. And that's basically accessing the subconscious mind because all of your behavior is driven from your subconscious thoughts. So all of these folks who are struggling mightily have no idea. And you say, don't let your story and your past define you. Right. But you have to know about it. You know, I put up a second ago, all change begins with awareness, right? So you have to be aware that if you're stuck in a bad situation now, a bad marriage, a bad relationship, you're overweight, you're drinking too much, you're depressed, you're anxious, it doesn't have to be that way. You can literally change your life in a matter of days, weeks, hours. It doesn't take years and years, but you have to start by knowing that why are these problems happening? They all start from your thinking. But as Mai is saying, you can think everything great, but if you don't sleep and you drink all the time, it's not going to work. So it's a combination of stuff, and it's not meant to be overwhelming. I have made a lot of these shifts. I quit drinking. I quit smoking weed. I quit eating sugar. And you think, oh, that's really hard. No, it's not. You just used to it. You get used to it. And I have no more hangovers anymore. I don't have a brain fog. I used to forget everything when I smoked weed. My mind is so much sharper now. So don't be overwhelmed and know that if you're struggling in any way, shape, or form, it can all be changed, and it can all be radically changed in a matter of weeks if you're willing to do the work and want to change.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to commend you. It starts with self-awareness and self-compassion. Nothing happens without self-compassion.
Agree.
Self-compassion gives you that strength to not be stuck in the paralysis of putting yourself down. So people know what they need to do health-wise. They know they need to get more sleep. They know they need to eat more vegetables, but they may not have the self-compassion to do it. And we treat ourselves the way we think we deserve to be treated. And then if we treat ourselves badly, other people treat ourselves badly too. So the way we treat ourselves is the way the external world treats us. And when you start going back to the basics, getting your sleep, mothering and fathering yourself, your world gets better.
So you mentioned a fight or flight mode. And I mentioned that if you're in a fight or flight mode, there's very few things you can do except run for that proverbial tiger. Well, so many of us are still running from a tiger that doesn't exist. So one of the ways that you can get yourself out of that fight or flight, they did a study at the University of, I think, UCLA, where they showed participants pictures of people who were in a triggered state, mad, angry, whatever. And as soon as they showed them the pictures, it put them into a fight or flight mode. They then asked the participants, please describe what you see. And as soon as they said, I see them feeling angry, sad, whatever, it flipped from their amygdala, their fight or flight, to their prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking brain, and it flipped them out of that. So I created this simple little thing at bradchandler.com/tracker where you can actually track when you have negative emotions. And at the top of this, it literally will tell you what to do. You pause. So when someone does something, if your spouse does something that irritates you or says something, don't fire back at them. Just pause a second. I know it's not easy, but just play along with me here. pause for a second, identify the emotion. I feel angry. And anger is always underlying sadness or some unresolved hurt. So you've paused, you identified it. You then give yourself compassion, just like Mai was saying, because as a child, many of us didn't get compassion for our emotions. So I'm feeling sad. So rather than beat yourself up about it, say, it's okay. You're feeling sad. We'll get through this. And the I am feeling sad is a feeling that comes and goes. Feelings comes and go. If you say I am sad, that's an identity, and identities don't really come and go. So be really careful with your choice of words to your mind, and that is I am feeling a certain way. And then the final thing is if you're with a partner who wants to grow, you say to that partner, hey, what you just said made me feel this way. It's not your fault. Can we talk about it? And then when you guys talk about it, you're going to heal your inner wounds and you're going to become closer as a couple. If you want to grab the tracker, just go to bradchandler.com/tracker and you can keep it on your phone. You can make a copy of it. You can keep it on Google where you can always put it in, and it can actually, you can track and see, are you progressing? Are you making progress? Because anytime you have an emotion, like a negative emotion, it's like your alarm system in your body saying, hey, something isn't right. And it's your opportunity to grow as a human being.
I would piggyback on that. I think that's amazing advice. I've taught about communication between couples. And one thing that evidence-based research shows, because I'm a big evidence-based research person fused with practical things you can do, if you feel yourself getting flooded, right? And you know that you're reactive, research shows that as soon as your pulse goes to 100 beats per minute, you're in fight or flight. So what the research shows is to go to the bathroom, tell your partner, we will discuss this in 30 minutes.
Love it.
Do not stonewall. That'll increases your chances of divorce or a breakup. Just give a definitive time. We're going to reconvene in 30 minutes or 1 hour. And during the break, you don't ruminate over the fight. You actually do something enjoyable. You might look at a magazine, you might zone out, but you bring your blood pressure down and your heartbeat to a regular level. Because if it's more than 100 beats per minute, your critical thinking and your prefrontal cortex of your brain, that's decision making, that's analytical thinking, that is impulse control, it goes out the window. You cannot reason with someone angry. You have to wait until they're calm.
Love it. And meditation, by the way, changes your brain in such a way that there's something called the default mode network, which is kind of tied into your fight or flight. Expert meditators, their default mode network is turned way down. People with anxiety and depression, it's turned way up. So the more that you meditate and get in that super relaxed state, you're actually like taking your brain to the gym and exercising it.
I did something that I want to share with the audience, and it's really worked, and it's getting into your subconscious mind. So I read this book called Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way, and many, many notable figures have done this. And it's 12 weeks. Every chapter is a different week. But the most important thing is she has these morning pages, and you write 3 pages the minute you get up. It taps into your subconscious mind. And I did this for 12 weeks. I'm on my 2nd journal. And what happened was an issue that didn't serve me anymore, it dissipated on the day I started the last page of the 12 weeks. I highly recommend you put pen to paper. It really gets your subconscious mind out. Even if you don't know what to write, just write. Write your dreams, write anything. But try that for 12 weeks. It's seismic.
I love it. And Stutz, the doc to the stars, to the famous Hollywood people, he says the same thing. He's like, journaling is a mirror to your subconscious mind. So since I've watched that 30 days ago, I now have all my clients as a regular routine start journaling, and I've got questions if they get stuck. And grateful journal is another great thing to do. In the morning, write 5 things you're grateful for. In the evening, write 5 things you're grateful for. And then write 3 things that happen good in your day. And that gets back to giving your permission to yourself to be happy, right? Because it's hard to be depressed or anxious when you're grateful.
Yeah. And I think comparison is the death of joy. That's where social media can really get people in a downward spiral. I use social media to learn, so it doesn't depress me. But if you're really down and you're feeling lack, turn off your social media, get into the real world, do forest bathing. That's going into the forest. Try the morning pages, 3 pages every single morning, the minute you wake up. Because the first hour that you wake up, you're in your alpha waves. And it's really great because your subconscious mind is really fresh. So I would try it the first thing when you get up. 3 pages without fail.
Love it. And look, if you can't start with 3 pages, start with a half a page, start with 1 page, just start writing. So Mai, tell us, how does food affect mood and happiness?
Food is real food feeds your vitality. You need vitality to be happy, right? But a lot of people aren't eating real food. They're eating junk food, which has no nutrients, no vitamins, and it just sucks from the body. So for example, soda. Drinking soda increases your chance of diabetes by 3-folds. It doesn't feed you life. It leaches calcium from your bones. So your body's working just to digest this toxic substance, but it's not nourishing you. So think of food as putting money into an ATM. Whatever you choose, it could be taking out your health savings, or what you put in, like an apple or water, that's a deposit into your health deposit. So depending what you're eating, say, for example, if you're eating junk food in the morning and you're not eating any foods that help feed your microbiome, that's a fancy way of saying your gut bacteria, you're actually hurting your hormone balance. You're hurting your mood, because certain foods help balance your microbiome, and your gut activates over 30 different hormones in your body. But you have to feed your gut foods that feed that bacteria. And junk food and dead food that doesn't have any enzymes or anything living, doesn't feed that gut bacteria. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I don't know if you follow Dr. Andrew Huberman from Stanford.
I do.
Amazing guy, right? He had a doctor on recently who talked about food. And this guy has spent his entire career looking at food and mental health and mental illness. And they took someone who was schizophrenic, couldn't go out of his house for 2 years. And within 3 days of changing their diet to a keto diet, so they removed all the sugar, like you said, his schizophrenia was gone, and he was allowed, and he was able to go out of the house. I was just like blown away. So diet and sleep, we're kind of going full circle back to how we started this podcast. Diet and sleep are critical components. And then throw in the alcohol and the weed that mess up your sleep. So all of those things are big determinants of happiness. Happiness is like sometimes a hard thing to define. Like sometimes you know it, sometimes you don't. After you answer, I'm going to tell you my journey on happiness. But what is your definition of happiness? And you're big on research. So what is some simple research-based practice that people can do to increase their sleep? What's another one? And then how do you define happiness?
Okay, so happiness is being able to have access to joy and being present. You cannot be joyful if you're not present. The ability to show up for your life, experience joy at appropriate moments. And it's interesting because according to Harvard and Stanford longevity studies, they studied people who lived in over 80 years old and didn't die of chronic disease. And the number one factor that they found for longevity and a contented life was healthy, happy connections. And that is connecting with people who make you feel nourished, safe, not judged. And the number one cause of the downfall of Harvard-educated white men in the 1940s was alcohol. So that was pretty profound. Between exercise, sleep, food, it's healthy connections. The number one thing you can do if you want to live a long, happy life free of disease is to really focus on your social connections. Because we do not navigate the world alone. We navigate it in the context of others. So I always tell my clients, who are the 5 people closest to you? Those are your mirrors. Choose them wise. If they say, oh, well, 5 of my friends are so unhealthy. I'm like, you don't want to ditch your friends, but make new ones. Go to where healthy, happy people hang out, and you start adapting their habits, because our energy affects each other. So I am very discerning of who I surround myself with. And I also surround myself with a growth mindset group of people, not fixed growth.
Yes. I mean, depression is a lot of lack of connection, right? And if you look at the evolution of man and how long we've been around, it's only been a fraction of time where we haven't been in tribes, where we've been living in houses separated from people. Usually we live together. So I think this connection and social media and food delivery and working from home doesn't help any of this. And I think that's why you're seeing things get worse around the globe. So let's ask this. How is happiness tied into self-love? And how does one know if they have self-love?
One knows that they have self-love in how they treat themselves. Are they showing up for themselves? Do they have healthy boundaries? Do they have the ability to say no when something so obviously will not serve them? Do they treat themselves with radical self-respect? Now, we're humans, we're messy people, but I know that when I wake up, I ask myself, will this serve me? What can I do to nourish myself? Who can I talk to that makes me feel loved, seen, and heard? Most importantly, do I see myself? Do I hear myself? Do I show myself love? That's more important than anyone showing me that. And that's how you know if you have self-love. Do you treat yourself well? Are you making good decisions for yourself that serves your higher good? And are you hanging out with great people that see you, that hear you, that respect you?
I created a quiz, a self-love quiz, actually, at bradchandler.com/quiz, because if we'd have been talking 3 years ago, you asked me, if I was listening to this podcast, I'd be tuning out because I've got all the self-love I need, but I didn't. I thought I did, and I thought that I didn't care if people judged me. I used to be like, I don't care what people think of me. All along I did. And it wasn't until going through my transformation and realizing that some of the things you said, do you have utter self-love? Do you have compassion for yourself? I didn't have those things. So I talked down to myself. I used to tell my ex-wife that how dumb I was. I used to say that all the time. She's like, what are you doing that? Why are you doing that? I used to judge people a lot. I had self-destructive behaviors. So if you're sitting here saying, well, I have self-love, go take the quiz, free, and you don't have to enter anything. Just go take it. It will give you your score. You just have to look at your results in life. It's like if I was asking an alcoholic and they're like, no, I would say, well, how has alcohol affected your personal relationships, your health, your work, your blah, 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 your family? So all you have to do is if you're sitting there thinking everything's great, I have self-love, are you in a deeply connected relationship? Is your health good? Do you do self-destructive things? Do you judge yourself? And if the answers to those are affirmative, then you've got some work to do. And the work is worth it because the other side of where you are can be absolutely magical, not only from a spiritual and joyous standpoint, but what we've just spent the last 25 minutes talking about from a health perspective. If you want to avoid illness and disease, you've got to learn how to have compassion and love for yourself.
Yeah, I love that you brought up judgment. I used to be a really critical, judgy person, and I thought I could just fix everybody. And I realized it was because I was very judgmental and critical towards myself. And trying to fix the world was a deflective way to not look at my own problems. So you're on a right path when you're not judgmental, when you're not trying to fix people, and when you're very curious about your own life and how you can serve. But number one, how do you show up for yourself? That's really important. It's very hard to truly love other people in a very pure way unless you show love for yourself. And that's not narcissistic. It's self-respect and self-compassion.
And the reason that most human beings don't show love for themselves is because something happened to them as a child. Their parents didn't intend, and it was their broken parents that caused them to feel unloved. So their whole life, they live feeling unloved. And that brought on the eating disorders, addictions, the bad marriages, the bad relationships, everything. But guess what? As an adult now, you don't need your parents' love anymore. And if you can become aware of it, you can get yourself out of that prison of childhood and you can provide yourself all the love that you ever needed. No one can love you like you can love yourself. And like you said, some people are like, is that narcissistic? No, it's not a love that I'm better than everyone else. It's a love that I am as good as anyone living or dead that's ever lived on this planet. And unfortunately, most people don't believe that, but that is the truth. Live in the truth and you cannot suffer.
Right. And self-compassion, I would highly recommend if people are grappling with self-esteem issues and self-compassion to check out the work of Dr. Kristin Neff. That's Neff. She's a psychologist and a professor of psychology and an expert in self-compassion, evidence-based, of course, at the University of Texas. But she's on YouTube. She's done TED Talks. She's incredible. So Kristin Neff, self-compassion.
So Mai, this has been fantastic. What an awesome podcast. Another edition of How to Be Happy podcast. How do people reach you? What's the best way to reach you?
They can reach me through my website, myhealthnow.com. That's MAI healthnow.com. They can find me on LinkedIn, Mai T, Trinh, and there's a contact form on my website. I'd love to hear from you. I'm also on Instagram at myhealthnow. That's MAI, and I'd love My Health Now. So yeah, that's how they can reach me. This has been wonderful. Brad, keep on sending good vibes to the world. It's so great to know you. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate it, please review it, please share it, do whatever you want with it. Just get the word out, because my whole purpose in life now is to make an impact and to give people the joy that I have gotten and to end their suffering. Because if you're suffering for any reason in life, you don't have to be suffering. I promise you there's a better way. So remember, love heals all, and see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Hit subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more life-changing content. And if you're struggling, you don't have to. Go to bradchandler.com/contact. There, you can join the Facebook community of like-minded entrepreneurs, and you'll see a button to schedule your freedom and happiness call. See you on the next episode.